That's right. Some people are just born to ramble and not afraid to gamble. They feel the call of the open road to experience new things, see new things, and see if their dogs can perform in strange places. I've always been that guy. I've always loved to load up, go to see new things, and test my dogs in new climates and environments. And so when I went to the Terrier Trials in Tyler, Texas in 2020, I ran into a guy that I knew shared that same feeling. And that's the first time I met Roy Ferebee. Roy drove all the way from somewhere around Boise, Idaho to Tyler, Texas with his dogs to see if they could perform on a bigger stage, a stage they weren't familiar with. And I get that, man. I have to do the same thing. I have to go see if I've just got dogs that can eat home cooking or if they can perform out on the road. Roy has traveled all over the country, just like I have, with our dogs, and we're just going to break it down. We're going to talk about traveling with our dogs, the expectations we should have when we get there. You know, he's traveled from Idaho to Maine. He's traveled from Idaho to Texas to hunt, besides the Terrier Trials. I missed him at Uncle Earl's this year because he traveled from Idaho to Louisiana to go to Uncle Earl's to test his dogs there, and then he hog hunted afterwards. So, man, this guy is a kindred spirit to me. I get what he's saying, and I wanted to have him on the podcast so that we could share our thoughts and some of the things that we do when we're logging in thousands of miles. I have no idea how many thousands of miles my dogs have traveled. Cajun and Diablo have got thousands of miles. Tough is closing in on them fast on just road miles and going to new places. I know that's not everybody's gig. I mean, my buddy Kevin Hall out there in Idaho, he says, why would I ever want to leave? I've got everything here. I get that. My wife is like that too. She loves being at home. She's fulfilled that way. But we all travel occasionally with our dogs, and there are going to be some really good tips and pointers in here about how to make a successful trip. How often do you stop? How do you feed beforehand? How do you feed on the road? How do you acclimate dogs to new environments? It's all in here, folks. I think you're going to love it. We're going to talk about a few other things as well, but I'm telling you, this is a box shaker. Let's get the tailgate down. It's time to dump the box. This is the Houndsman XP Podcast.
Good dog, get that bear. Get that bear
The
in here.
original podcast for the complete Houndsman.
Look at your coat and go, Justin Hyde! We're gonna get him! We're gonna get him!
The podcast that represents our lifestyle of extreme performance.
Get up there! Get him! Get him! Yeah, good boy! Good boy, Ranger!
Uniting houndsmen across the globe, from east to west, north to south.
You know, if you're going to catch a cat or a lion, you know, you have to have teamwork.
We take you to the wildest places on earth.
Yeah, so how many days a week can you spend out there?
As much as I can, to be honest with you. Anytime that I get, I'm out there.
Join us for every heart-pounding adventure on Houndsman XP.
I'll tell you like I tell everyone else, I'm going to hunt whether you're here or not, so you might as well be here.
The Houndsman XP Podcast is fueled by Joy Dog Food. Joy Dog Food has a rich tradition of supporting the Houndsman of America. Founded in 1945, Joy is proud of its history and the relationship it has built with the American Houndsman. And in 76 years, there's never been a recall. Made with 100% American-made high-quality ingredients, Joy Dog Food has one of the highest calorie-dense formulas on the market. For 76 years, this made-in-America product has kept hunting dogs in the field day after day, season after season. And when we say made in America, Joy has a long track record of fighting for American freedoms by being on the front lines against the animal rights movement and their extremist tactics. Joy will fuel your hounds and fight for your freedoms, fueled by Joy. All right, everybody, I'm glad to have Roy Ferebee on this episode of the Houndsman XP Podcast. I'm not even sure where Roy lives. He's traveled so much, and sometimes he's in Texas, sometimes he's in Louisiana, trying to stalk around hog dog events. He's in Alabama, but I think most of the time you're in Idaho, aren't you, Roy?
Yeah. I'd say I reside in Idaho and in southwestern Idaho and Kuna specifically, and but yeah, I'm a bit of a traveler.
Yeah. Well, we first met a couple years ago at Tyler down at the Terrier Trials.
At the Boar's Nest.
At the Boar's Nest, and Seth is the one that cornered you and got you. I think you made an appearance on Tailgate Talks. He roped you in,
it was.
He roped you into that pointless conversation about superior life forms.
Yes, he did.
He's good at that. He's
a crafty critter.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. We just got done on an East Texas hunt. Seth and I met down there and hog hunted and had a big time. But he's just a wild man. I mean, he's just nonstop. Every time you're around the guy, you're energized, and he's in the middle of everything all the time.
Yeah, I think Seth is just one of those guys that you kind of have to have a good time around. It's kind of impossible not to. He's
not going to let you not have a good time.
Yeah, his vibe is contagious. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, the reason, how long you been in hounds, Roy? How long you been chasing hound dogs and terriers and bulldogs and?
Well, I think this year probably made 26 years. I've spent probably the last 12 years with big game hounds. Prior to that, it was terriers and bulldogs and weight pull events and protection training stuff. But it's probably been the better part of 10, 12 years I've spent behind big game dogs.
So when you were doing the terrier stuff before that, were you in Idaho at the time? Have you been in Idaho your whole life?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Idaho. I have family that owns property in South Central Texas, and so I have roots in the South, and that's my connection. I have family and friends there, but nope, I'm born and raised in the Pacific Northwest. And
so, what were you doing with terriers and bulldogs in Idaho?
Originally, it all started out, just a hobby thing, just a kind of a pet owner thing. And it kind of evolved into weight pull events and personal protection stuff. And we kind of tried to dabble in everything and did some show dog stuff. And to be honest with you, I really didn't have a direction with my dog passion at that time. I knew I had a passion for animals and working dogs specifically, but I hadn't really found my direction yet. And that didn't happen for me until probably I got my first big game hound.
Yeah.
And I think I found my true direction and purpose in dogs.
Were you incorporating the terriers and stuff into your big game dogs, or was that kind of did you take a break from terriers and go that route?
Well, I had, bigger terriers, and then I got digging terriers. Well, it was a couple years after I got into big game hounds, I got into digging terriers because it was, I don't know, it's just kind of hard to be a houndsman and not have a terrier around in the truck with you. And it's, I think for a long time, I thought you couldn't be a real houndsman without a terrier in the pickup. So as I got out of pit bulls and bulldogs and stuff like that, I still had a desire for highly driven dogs, terrier dogs. And so I think it was probably 2 years into owning big game hounds. A friend of mine offered me the opportunity to own my first Patterdale. And I got my first Patterdale Terrier in, and I started, digging behind him and doing a little bit of work behind him. And that started a whole different obsession, and it's kind of, it's hard being a dog person because you can get really strung off in a lot of different directions. So that's, it's, I just loved working dogs. So every chance and every way I could, I wanted to be working a dog. And, and that's kind of how it all came together as far as the terriers and the hounds. And I just got away from the show dog scene and the protection dog scene. And when I was a kid, my dad had a close friend that hound hunted, and that kind of piqued my interest into hounds. And as I mentioned in that post I made, a week or so ago about ego, I didn't get into hounds with the right intention. I got into hounds with the idea of upping my fur take and getting more fur in the fur shed. And that was my purpose into getting hounds. And now that I've owned them for, a few years now, it's my perspective on it has changed. I own hounds for a different reason now, and probably more of a pure.
When you say your fur shed, I mean, were you trapping as well, or?
Yes, I was a trapper. Yeah. As an Idahoan, I think, a lot of us outdoorsmen, we kind of go through our, we want to do everything in the outdoors. So we duck hunt and we bird hunt and we big game hunt and we trap and we fish and, and bobcats in Idaho at that time were bringing fantastic money and which was a horrible thing for the bobcat population. But at that time, bobcat prices were up, and I was running a trap line, and I just wanted to increase my odds. I wanted to run a trap line in one drainage and run hounds in the other. And I learned very fast they're not conducive to one another.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's bad for bobcats. It's probably I definitely lived through the fur boom of the late 70s, early 80s, and saw some of the problems with it. But one of the things that is important to not miss is that when animals don't have any value, then it's like in South Africa, if the wildlife over there did not have a value, then the agriculture, everything would be geared towards agriculture, and wildlife would lose its place. So with that value comes protection and funding and management and all that sort of stuff. Just Absolutely. Like the bobcat, man, that's the most prolific little cat on the North American continent. And ours aren't worth a nickel out this way. Not much anyway. I got a terrier and a bulldog in this room right here. Jeez, old Pete's are driving me crazy.
I hid for mine specifically for that reason.
I think I'm going to throw mine out. But anyway, the thing of it is they've got value. And when they have value, then anything that's got money attached to it, politicians are interested in. So they're going to work hard. They're going to work hard. Let me put these little mutts outside real quick, Roy.
Yes, sir.
Hey guys, are you using Onyx Hunt on your phone, the app? Pretty cool, man. We just got back from this trip that we're talking about right now. So I hunted Louisiana and Texas, and everybody was on Onyx, looking at landowners, looking at terrain, looking at all the features that those comprehensive maps have to offer. And I wasn't even using the map cards in my GPS. I'm just coordinating everything with my GPS and looking at Onyx, and boom, I had to retrieve dogs off of a neighboring property in Louisiana. And when we were in Texas, we were checking landowner information. We had to do it there as well. And it made it super easy to be able to find out who owned the property, gain access and permission to get that done. You need to be using Onyx, and you can check out Onyx by going to houndsmanxp.com, go to our sponsor page, click on their logo, big red square with a white X in it. Go to their website and sign up for their elite membership. You get access to all 50 states, all kinds of cool features. You can mark routes, trails, signs, all of it. It's all right there. Enter the promo code HXP20 and get 20% off. Know where you stand with OnX. It wouldn't be a podcast if we didn't have an interruption by a dog, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
It'd be like, nah, these guys are just playing. But we live with these crazy things all the time. Oh man. Well, you brought up that post that you made a few weeks ago about ego, and that's one of the things that we've always tried to do on this podcast is help everybody improve their game. And when you got into hounds, you started to allude to what you were what your focus was and how it's changed. And I love to hear guys' stories when they, as they evolve into the lifestyle and the sport. So when you got into it, what was your specific, I guess to increase the fur take, of course, but that doesn't necessarily get attached to ego automatically. So how did the ego part play into it?
Oh, Lord Almighty. Okay. Well, I'll be completely honest with you. I went into bobcat hunting with hounds with kind of the same impression that, they're a very prolific animal to hunt with hounds and also a very difficult animal to hunt with hounds. And I got told many, many times by many a good men, many a better men than myself, that I wasn't going to catch a cold my first 5 years, that it was going to be hard and it was going to be work. And that first year I went out and bought a couple dogs and we put a whooping on the bobcats. I won't lie. Yeah. We really kind of made all those guys telling me that look foolish. I think, and one day we caught 3 and that was unheard of. They're like, you're catching those off your trap line. You're catching those off your trap line. And I was like, I have video and picture proof. I absolutely did not. These are all, all harvested and taken in front of the dogs. And so that first year I got in, I was like, man, if we're breezing through bobcats the way we are, everything else is going to be easy.
So your head just start blowing up at that point?
It was just giant inflated. It was just huge inflated. When you come into something that was supposed to be so difficult and it came so easily right off the bat. It gave me an altered perception of what was going on and what it really took to be in houndsman. And I think that following year I started learning, that the following year, the second year I got into hounds, I got talked into running bear. And, I had no interest in running bear because, like we talked, there was no monetary value in them. So I didn't, I'd had no interest in killing bears because you couldn't sell the hide and had no interest in really eating a bear and not at that time. And so it just didn't have any monetary value to me. So I didn't have, you see, like I said, I was in it for the wrong reasons and my ego was already starting to get in the way. And, but I finally got talked into going ahead and running bear. And that first year running bear, I didn't see a bear on my own. If I didn't have another seasoned hunter houndsman with me, I wasn't looking at a bear, and it was really super frustrating. And I started putting it all back onto my dogs, you can catch bobcats, but you can't catch bears. And, something's wrong with my dogs. My dogs are wrong. My dogs are messed up. And it didn't come until, probably another year or so that it was me. It was my ego getting in the dog's way. I thought I knew more than the dogs, and that was kind of really holding them back.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we all probably go through that at some point. I know I certainly did. I think it's just a natural thing. We start feeling a little bit of success, or we start getting that taste of success, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got this figured out. And I think it's just a natural progression. I've seen it happen to deer hunters, duck hunters, everybody. When we were in college, we've been duck hunting for 3 years, and we were killing limits and mallards, and then we were buying all these and then the first guy that learned how to use a fluke call and for geese and different things, and all of a sudden we were the waterfowl experts on everything. And it happens with turkey hunters, it happens with houndsmen, but
I think it's just a human response. I mean, it's
that's what you said, and that's what I liked about it. So what was your let's just kind of recap that a little bit, because I think it's worth, not everybody's on Facebook, but for some reason, this hit home with me. And I'm trying to figure out how I've messed up my phone because I had it all pulled up. Give me a second for the technically challenged here. I run a podcast, but can't run my own phone.
I had the wife set this all up for me to even get this far. So
yeah. So for everybody that didn't happen to see this, it says a battle between man and his ego, a battle as old as man himself. I think ego is most prevalent in the showing sporting dog circuits, at least to me, because that's what I surround myself with. I'd assume a lot said with the introduction of the internet and text, so would be the death of the working dog. In a lot of ways, they were absolutely correct. The downhill decline started. So what did you mean by that part, that the downhill decline has started in the working dog?
This goes clear back to, bulldogs for me. And we had that mindset with bulldogs, that technology and the invention of the internet was going to be the death of the bulldog. And in a lot of ways it was. It absolutely was, because people were getting the opportunity to see stuff that only a select few were able to see. Mm-hmm. And it was putting stuff into public eye that was never in the public eye before. And it was giving people that weren't from that traditional background, or a dog background at all, it was giving them a chance to form their own uneducated opinions. And that's when you started getting breed bans, and you started getting this negative stereotype surrounding the pit bull. And it all started way back then, with the invention of the internet.
Michael Vick didn't help.
Absolutely not. I mean, it's and we're going to have people drag us down like that. In every breed, in every circle, there's going to be bad apples. Sure. And so I think, with that, we're always battling that fact anyway, but doubled with the fact that we're putting it in front of people's faces that would normally not even care or even look at it. And
you talk about bulldogs, and you just talk about the weight pulling part of it. The weight pulling part, people out there do not think. I've seen it in horse pulling. I've seen it in mule pulling. I've seen it in dog pulling. They don't understand that dogs are utilitarian and bred by nature to do that sort of work. So when people actually see them doing work in our current society, most of them don't even think they should have to work. So let alone their dog,
Absolutely. No, absolutely. You're correct. And that's kind of carried over into the big game, the hound world, as technology has gotten better and more advanced, and even as we're utilizing that technology right now in a positive way, it's also used in a negative light, and that's what I mean. That's the beginning of the downfall. And when Facebook came about and YouTube came about, you had these animal rights organizations like Wolf Patrol. They come about, and they were born, and it gave them a platform to kind of, use us against ourselves. And I firmly believe that. And I haven't always been, the poster child for houndsmen. Like I said, I came into this as an egotistical monster, and I had to learn. I wasn't born into hounds. I wasn't raised into hounds. I had to find a good mentor, and I had to learn, the hard way. I had to burn up some boot leather, hiking miles and figuring dogs out, and learning that I was mainly the issue. It was never the dogs. It was my ego getting in the way, me thinking that I knew better than the dogs. me thinking that, I've trained hundreds of dogs, it's definitely not me. And,
well, I think
so
social media gave us the opportunity to stand on a stump and toot our own horn. And
absolutely.
I did the exact same thing. You get a cast win at a little podunk coon hunt. And the first thing you do before you even get your win slip is put a post on Facebook that you won your cast, or, and some people get away with it a lot better, than other people do. It's pretty easy to spot when somebody's, beating themselves on the back as hard as they can. And when you get other people, it's like, man, we had a good time, had a good hunt, got in the money tonight, or we treated a good bear today, had a lot of fun with friends, stuff like that. There's a difference between sharing your experiences with friends and then seeing the bloviating post by somebody that's never accomplished anything except winning.
Oh, absolutely. There's a huge difference in being proud of something and then, bragging about something.
Yeah.
And humility is sometimes is a trait that's learned. And I'm an example of that. I wasn't the most humble person my whole life. And especially when it came to dogs, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I worked hard for a lot of years to be successful in the different avenues of dogs I was in. And I was successful.
It's hard to talk about being humble and then talking about the things you've done with dogs. You know what I mean? It is.
Yeah, it really is. It's a double-edged sword. Absolutely.
But, I know you're a dog man, Roy. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Just the short time I've spent around you and watch you, you're a dog man. There's no denying that. The way you post things on social media, it doesn't appear to be that, but I'm with you, man. I did the same thing. Let's move on through this thing just a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Because this is a part that started hitting home for me. So this is probably the pot calling the kettle black, being I've been accused of being an out of body egotistical, especially about dogs, but through my experiences learning that I'm a nobody in the dog world and accepting that for a long time, I was a houndsman for the wrong reasons. I told myself it was for the dogs, but was it? We get stuck on the end result, the rewards of a hunting dog's hard work and efforts, not the process. Let's just stop right there. Well, let's talk about that part right there. Man, when I read that, I was like, we used to teach the stages of hunter development and hunter's education. And you can absolutely see this in people. When I was around as many hunters, and we all are, I mean, you're around hunters every day. I'm around hunters every day. I've hunted my whole life, but my job was around hunting too. And egos cause people to do things that they would never normally do. I mean, the guy that's an upstanding church going, leader of the Boy Scouts, gives money to local conservation club, and he just couldn't resist the urge to do something dumb because he felt like he had something to prove to his buddies, and he broke the law to do it. And I saw stuff like that, but the stages of that hunter development starts from the very beginning to the last part of being willing to mentor people. And you talk about the process, but you also talk about the end result. That's a little bit of dichotomy there. We get stuck on the end result. What do you mean? What do you mean? What is the end result really?
The end result that, fur in a tree, successful hunts. Everybody gauges their hunts on success on
right.
Harvesting an animal. And to me, that's success that's just a bonus part to success. To me, I found a lot of love in the process. I think in the journey of wanting to better my stock of working dogs, I knew I was going to end up with fur in the tree, but I wanted to find some love in the process. And I didn't want it to be just always about, that harvest picture at the end. Mm-hmm. Because that gives the dogs zero credit. The dogs are standing there in a picture, but it gives them zero credit for all the work that comes in before that, for all the work that comes before the success picture. the trophy pictures and the grip and grins there's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and money spent and gas burned and there's just a lot that goes on to that success photo, and to that end result. So I think that's what people get so caught up in is I'm going to go get hounds and I'm going to get a big Boone and Crockett lion on a cliff edge and I'm going to make a picture of it and there's going to be a post about it and I'm just going to feed my ego with a shovel. And that's what that is you're doing that for you. You're not doing that for the dogs.
One of the things Brad Luttrell said that always stuck with me, he's the one of the founders of Go Wild, social media platform for hunters. I don't know if you're on there or not. Are you a member of Go Wild? Have you been on there?
No.
Okay. It's a social media platform built for hunters by hunters. And when I interviewed Brad about social media influence, he said, man, the thing we're missing is telling the story of the process. He said, we see plenty of pictures out there, the end result, the grip and grin, but it gives no context. It makes it look like it's easy. And that feeds the narrative, especially for houndsmen, because even other hunters have a hard time deciding whether or not hunting with hounds is fair chase. Whether it's unfair or it's too easy or whatever, because they don't see the process that we go to get that hound to that point where we can enjoy that success. So I love guys like Alex Khrushchev from Virginia with his Lycus, man. He posts stuff every day on development of his dogs and he's telling a whole story. And maybe people get tired of seeing, little yellow fuzzy dogs running around and think Alex is tooting his own horn, but I don't see it that way. I see a guy.
I think it's fantastic.
He's showing the whole process. He's not just showing dog, bear, and then a trophy shot of the bear, So and there's several other people out there that do the same thing.
It's really kind of, I think him and his like has really broadened the horizon to bear hunting with dogs. I mean, and what he does is, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a wonderful thing. It's you have to find love in the process, and that's with everything, not just dogs. I think I carried that into my life. And
yeah,
you have to have love for the process and what goes into the work at the day to day. Like as we speak, I have a dog that's downstairs healing right now, and I've been stressed out for 2 days over him. And no one gets to see that stuff, and
right.
And in a lot of ways, this is where, social media and stuff and is beneficial because it gives people a chance that doesn't do that kind of stuff to witness the stuff that kind of can happen. And what we do go through as houndsmen and as traveling houndsmen, I traveled clear across the country with that dog's leg the size of a Louisville Slugger. And it was it's the process, you have to,
right.
Now that he's out of the woods and we got the tooth out of his leg and he's on the mend, it's all great now, and we're going to be making bear season and real happy about that. But the behind the scenes stress and the struggle and the trips to the vet's office and the trips to training and roading and conditioning and nutrition's been a huge deal online on Facebook lately. And so it's, it's the process. You got to find love in the process,
part of that process, and anybody that's trained young dogs knows this. Sometimes a successful hunt is just going out and hunting your butt off and not catching game, but you didn't run any trash races. You didn't have, any of the problems. At the end of the day, all your dogs were recalled from wherever and they came right to you like they were supposed to. That's all part of the process.
Yeah. That's a successful day. If we can go out into the woods and get back home in one piece, that's a success story to me.
Yeah.
I mean, if we went out and we had a beautiful day in God's country and we came home and no one was hurt and, that's a successful day, and all those little successful days build up to that grip and grin, that trophy picture, and that's what makes that picture so valuable to me is, all the buildup. That dash in between. And that's kind of what makes it beautiful.
Yeah, I want to kind of get through this pretty quick here, Roy, because we got some other stuff to talk about, but this is worth recapping here, I think. To pick it up later on the post, said we should take no credit for a lot of what our dogs do, is what you're basically saying. In today's world where everything we do in the public is in the public eye and up for opinion, scrutiny, and judgment, we must pay attention. Facebook or social media is a tool for them to watch us feed our egos and self-erupt. Again, I'm guilty of feeding this monster, the ego monster. It's a hard monster to fight, even for the best of men, of which I am far, far from. But as self-aware men, we must pay attention. We are the last of a dying breed, a houndsman. This is not a God-given right nowadays, but a privilege that they will take if we do not self-manage and hold ourselves accountable for our actions and think before we act and really ask ourselves why we are doing this. Why are we doing this? For the dogs, for you, for the end result, whatever it may it be pure and from a good place. Those are pretty wise words right there, man. I mean, there isn't anything that's in the crosshairs more on the anti-hunting movement than houndsmen.
You know, and it's yeah, I agree with you. It's that's a soft spot for me because it's I was one of those guys, you know, I was one of those guys that posted those pictures and they could have been pictures that, you know, could be damaging and it could be a black eye for us. And it may not be now. And it may be 10 years down the road when they do take it from us. But as houndsmen, we're responsible for what we put out into the public. We're responsible for what the public sees and perceives us as. And if we're putting out a bad image and we're posting pictures that aren't so classy and stuff like that, that's all damaging to all of us. And we have to pay attention. You know, like I said, I was one of those guys, you know, and I had to learn to self-regulate and not post a braggy, you know, like, oh, look what we did today pictures, because my dogs don't benefit from that. My dogs can't get on Facebook and they can't see a picture and be like, yeah, that's me, you know, so it's, you know, so I'm not, so that's all for us. That's not for them, you know, and when I'm talking about a good, pure place, I'm talking about doing it for them, doing it for the betterment of the dogs, doing it for the betterment of the houndsman tradition, of our dying way of life, because it is. The simple fact is we're guarding our gates constantly because of anti-hunters and people who are not educated on our way of life. And
we're winning, so man. I'm telling you. I'm going to make this statement right now. My prediction is Colorado's initiative this year is going to die. And we're going to win that one. And I think that's going to be a huge win for us. I see more people getting involved with hounds. I see more people that have never hound hunted, but understand that they can't shoot darts at something they don't understand. I'm seeing more of that. I'm encouraged. I think we're making a comeback. I think guys like Corey Huntsman in Utah, Houndsman Association, Robbie Kroger with Blood Origins making that great video, Lionheart. There's a lot of big players right now that are shedding some light. Clay Newcomb. All of us are looking back and saying, hey, this has been a misunderstood and mischaracterized segment of our hunting society for way too long. And that's what this podcast was that was the only reason this thing was created, was to bring what the truth was about houndsmen out there. And I think we are gaining ground. I absolutely
agree. You know, I think that it's finally, I think as houndsmen, we kind of understand how we need to utilize this Facebook stuff and the social media stuff to our advantage. At first, you know, yeah, absolutely. Woo, you know, we're finally learning from our mistakes. So I think, you know, we're now finally using it to come together. We're using it in a positive manner to bring education to people, to shine light on us in a positive manner, and to educate people and to kind of show people that we're not the villain, you know, right, that we're here to help, and our dollars contribute probably more than anybody's. And we're conservationists. We're the original conservationists. We're out there in the woods before everyone else. And how, as a houndsman, we've been selective. We've been managing ourselves, but that hasn't been in the public eye. And I think, finally we're starting to utilize this Facebook stuff and the social media stuff in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we are absolutely gaining ground. And if we can keep, standing behind these guys like Corey Huntsman and all these guys, the Eastern Idaho Houndsman Association here in Idaho, they have done a lot with the Black Bear Initiative. The Idaho Fish and Game, where they were trying to take seasons from us. They were trying to shorten seasons, and any loss is a big loss. And that's how we look at it in the state of Idaho. We give an inch, they're going to take a mile. So we ain't giving an inch. And them boys over at the Eastern Idaho Houndsman Association have been working their tail ends off. And I just want to give them a shout out to all the hard work they've done locally in the state of Idaho, and really protecting our way of life here in the state. They do wonderful, wonderful work.
Yep, for sure.
And I don't think without the social media, I think we're definitely winning. So
yeah. But just remember, every time somebody gets this idea that it would be cool to have a bulldog and 4 hounds stretching a critter and putting it out there, all you're doing is loading the gun and handing it to the antis to shoot you with. And I don't care what anybody says. That's what's happening. It serves no good purpose. So, tell your whole story. Take as many pictures of your houndsman club cleaning up the roadside, or going to a children's hospital, or talking to hikers at the trailhead. Take as many of those pictures as you do of, your dogs with critters. I think that's
Take more of them. Take more. It's show all aspects. If you're going to show one side, show all of it.
For sure.
I'm big on being completely honest. It's I'm not going to really hide anything from you. But I'm going to show you all of it. It's not all, we're not all bloodthirsty and, out for killing. And sometimes that's what it's about, I guess. But most of us are not there for that. That's what it started for me, but it's turned into a working dog passion, seeing dogs grow and develop and become hunting dogs. And I enjoy seeing kids harvest their first animals, and so it's changed. It's evolved for me. And I think as houndsmen, we all have to do a little evolving as the times grow and change. And
yeah, I agree.
It's just something that has to happen as houndsmen. We have to evolve a little bit.
Let's take a short break right here, and we'll be right back after we got to pay some bills, get our sponsors out there. One of the things you talked about was nutrition. We've got the Complete Elite Nutrition line on our website at houndsmanxp.com. All the dog supplies are there. There's also a whole horse line that we haven't even had time to get up yet. But so let's take a brief break here, and we'll be right back. The Houndsman XP Podcast Network is powered by Cajun Lights. All of your lighting needs for hunting can be taken care of at Cajun Lights. They have 3 models of cap lights. I'm going to run through them real quick. You've got the Rougarou, which is their high-end light. If you're a competition hunter and you got to find that coon up in a tree and it's all riding on finding that coon, you'll want the Rougarou on your head. Next is the Bayou. That's a pretty standard light, but it's got packed with features. It's got multiple colors. It's got walking lights. It's got the red, the green, the amber. It's all built in right into that light. And then you have one of my personal favorites, the Micro Gator. The Micro Gator is an ultra lightweight cap light. It's got all the features of a white light, red, green, and amber. I've used this light for everything from finding bear tracks early in the morning to coon hunting at night to working on plumbing in the house, changing tires on the side of the road. My truck doesn't leave the driveway without a Cajun light in it, and that light is the Micro Gator. Every Cajun light is durable, made from the highest quality components, and it is backed by Cajun's top-rated customer service. Check out Cajun Lights. You can go to our website at houndsmanxp.com, go to our sponsors page, hit that link, it'll take you right to Cajun Lights. Check them out. they got a lot of stuff to offer over at Cajun Lights. All right, we're back. Roy, you and I both just got off a long road trip, and for some reason you didn't even hang around to like, you said you looked for me at Uncle Earl's, but I don't believe you. I think you ran and out. You knew I was coming. It's like, I'm not standing around talking that knothead. I'm getting out of here.
It was a busy time for me. You know, we came down. I showed up for the first day of Earl's, and
no kidding. You were there day one, huh?
We were there day one, and they started everything a little bit earlier this year, and so I wanted to make sure I was there to run my little dog and the one dog, and it's funny because I had a whole string of dogs, and everyone was like, "Man, you brought a whole string of dogs to compete," and I was like, "Well, I only brought one dog to compete with. The rest are just here to go hunting with me." But
how many people asked you if you had plots for sale while you were there?
I couldn't even tell you.
Oh man, I tied my string out because I did the same thing. I showed up, had a whole string of dogs. We were just there to hunt, wasn't there to run at all. And man, people were just like trying to buy dogs all weekend.
I had a gentleman stop me in the street, in the public road before I even pulled into the fairgrounds. He walked out into the street and stopped me and asked if I'd sell one of my plots out of the dog box. And I was like, "Man, like, you're a pretty serious character to stop traffic." And he's like, "Them are beautiful animals, and we don't see them around here very much." And I was, it was pretty humbling experience. Yeah, man, I can't even tell you how many people wanted to, can I have a business card? Do you have any puppies? There was a lot of people that took pictures with the plots, and it makes you feel good. A lot of people appreciate the plot dogs, and that feels good as a plot guy,
especially at a cur dog event. I mean, because that area right there is cur dog heavy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that is Catahoula country. It's if you're not a Catahoula owner, you're kind of the black sheep, and I'm kind of the black sheep anyway, being the guy from Idaho. But
and me being from Indiana, coming down to Louisiana, so Yankees in Louisiana. I just tell people, I was like, you don't want any of those trashy things. That's what I'd tell them. So.
And it's funny because the dogs, they rode for 2 days in the dog box, and they were chomping at the bit to get out to go hunting. And our first drop, we dropped right on track, right on hog track. And they went in, pulled up bait at 900 yards, and I stormed in there to them stretching out armadillos. And it was a pretty frustrating first drop.
Oh, see, that's a humble man right there that'll admit it. Hey,
I think that's part of being a rambling man. That's part of being a rambling man. If you don't think them dogs aren't as antsy as you to get out there and hunt, you got another thing coming.
My trashy pack, the first hog I dropped them on, the hog crossed the road, and I ran back to the buggy and grabbed dogs and turned them out, and they took the track backwards. Backtrack that sucker bigger than anything. And I made a stupid mistake. I knew I did it. I already had one dog that was out on the ground, and I thought, man, but he did. It was tough, my terrier, but he didn't actually see the hog cross. He was screwing around molesting an armadillo or something. I don't know. But anyway, I saw that hog cross the road, and I got all wound up, and they don't ever, I've dumped that box like that so many times and never had a problem with backtracking, but they passed Mike Colley's dogs going the right way, and they still went backwards. So yeah, there you go.
Chris, I've had that happen so many times on bear races here in Idaho. We've had a bear cross the road, and the dogs have even seen him cross the road, but they take their eyes off of him to get unhitched off the rig rack, and the out track is just as fresh as the in track. Absolutely. So, a lot of times you can't blame them. And sometimes you got to check your ego and be like, that was my fault. I didn't 100%. I got to point these fur missiles in the right direction before I press release,
Yeah.
So it's,
yeah. Cause Mike the Knife walks up with his dogs, which I know to do. I just got wound up. Walks up with both dogs, points them in the right direction, lets them go. They ran 60, 70 yards and had that bar hog bayed. And My shit eaters are burning it up going the other way.
Hey, but ain't nothing sounds so pretty, right?
Oh, they sounded awesome. Tough sounded like he was tied to it, buddy. He was just squalling going through the woods. And there wasn't a thing to be smiling about, even though he was out there just hunting his little butt off.
It's sometimes we got to take a little advice from the dogs and, enjoy it. And that's part of the process, and that's, you can't sit back and go, you got to let dogs be dogs sometimes. And that's part of it.
Yeah. Well, both of us spend quite a bit of time on the road, traveling around. And I like going, I call my dog the trashiest pack, around east of the Mississippi. Luke Worthington has the trashiest pack west of the Mississippi. And I remind him of that a lot. But it's kind of a running joke between Luke and I. But when you travel with dogs, it adds, there's a heck of a lot of more easy things to do than to travel with a box full of dogs.
Oh, Lord Almighty, yes.
Just the logistics of moving dogs from one place. It dictates so many things. It dictates how long your trip takes, where you can stop, when you can stop. It really just is a pain in the butt, but we do it. Yeah. It's
I wouldn't have it any other way. As big of a pain as it is, I enjoy it. I love it. It's the whole process of it. Crossing the country, people are like, oh, it's got to be a nightmare crossing the country with 10 dogs. And I'll tell you, I enjoyed every bit of it. It's, is it work? Absolutely. Is it dumb sometimes? Absolutely.
Yeah.
You'll hear videos of me cussing myself going, what am I doing? But I wouldn't be any other place, but there's a lot that goes into it. Absolutely. There's a lot that people don't even think about that goes into traveling with hunting dogs and trying to be successful at doing so. I wanted to get outside of my box. I was in my comfort zone here in Idaho, and we catch bears all the time here and catch lions, and I just wanted to experience something different, something else. I wanted to see what these other bear dog men were seeing, and I wanted to see what these hog dog boys were seeing, and
right.
And I just wanted to get different experiences, and I wanted to see if the plots that I were feeding were able to sustain this travel and be successful at it. And
right.
And I wanted to know that I was breeding. I hadn't even bred anything yet, but I wanted to make sure the dogs I were feeding were this versatile, go anywhere, do everything dog.
Mm-hmm.
And
what are you finding out?
They're definitely that, but I have to you have to check your ego at the door. I mean, that's a lot, it goes back to your ego again and how you think your dog should perform versus how they're going to perform. And, it took a minute, there was a big learning curve when we first left Idaho, went to Texas, and we were in Texas for a year. And we first brought the dogs down. I thought it was going to be easy. I won't lie to you. I was like, we're going to transition from bear to hogs, and the dogs aren't even going to skip a beat.
Mm-hmm.
Plots were bred for this kind of stuff. It's going to be cake. But coming down from a higher elevation down to Texas, it affected the dogs. They were used to the thinner air and the higher elevation, and they're used to a little bit more drier conditions. And barometric pressure was different, humidity was different, ground conditions were different. And as an egotistical human being, you don't take all that stuff into consideration right away. So you're like, why aren't we catching it? It's the dogs. And that's, at least it was for me, that was always my first reaction. Like, it's the dogs. And maybe it was a little bit, but it was more me not giving them the time to acclimate. It's, that's a big part of it, is giving your animals time to acclimate to the elevation. They get elevation sickness just like humans do. It's all a big change. Everything's different. Even on the post I made about it, there's a gentleman that brought up, my dogs won't drink water from a different state, and so he packs his own water,
Yeah.
So it's little things like that absolutely do matter. You know, I mean, anything that's a comfort for the dog and keep the dog settled and happy is going to be beneficial for him when you get to your destination.
One of the things I kind of want to run through a few things and talk about some of the tricks that we've learned about traveling with dogs. And one of the things that I found was you don't have to stop as often as you think you do. And I've pushed it a little bit, but my dogs are good for 8 hours of riding in the box, as long as they've got, water in the, I put travel bowls in the dog box with them, and they can get to water and all that stuff. But a dog can put in a good 8 hours of riding before I get them out a lot of times. How long do you usually go?
It's 6-8 hours. Yeah. I think I pushed it 10 hours.
Yeah, I have too.
I've never had dogs are tougher than me when it comes to riding.
Exactly. Yeah. I've never had a mess in my dog box, in the Old South dog box that I have out there, by dogs that were mine. I'll just start from the top. When I take off, before I take off, I used to get up in the morning whenever I woke up in the morning is what time I hit the road. And now I leave a little bit later so that I can put a good mile and a half of road with the side-by-side and just let them get it all out of their system, all the crap and all the pee and all the mark and all that stuff. And then bring them back. And they know when they get back, the dog box is sitting there, it's open. They get in, take the collars off, and they're ready to ride. That's the way I start every time.
It's with guys like us, we're used to it, and our dogs are kind of conditioned to it. It's and I think that plays a huge factor. Is our dogs are conditioned into it. So just like telling the regular Joe that they can throw their dog in the box and go for an 8-hour trip, like, don't do that. My dog, like I said, my dogs have been conditioned to travel. And we already, I fast my dogs once a week. When we're not running hard and we're not working, I fast once a week. So I'll adjust my fasting day to the day we're leaving. So the dogs are empty. There's nothing in their stomachs. And so they'll have their fast day usually as our first day on the road.
Oh my gosh, Roy, that's so cruel.
Lord Almighty, I've caught so much guff over fasting. It's a bit
I'm telling you, there's not a darn thing wrong with it, and people should do it too. But
absolutely,
I tell my wife all the time, she's like, you don't feed the dogs on the first day of the trip? I'm like, no. Usually I withhold feed the night before. And then just a light feeding if I've got to do an overnight. If it's, leave early in the morning, I'll withhold feed the night before, real light feeding on the first night on the road. And then usually I'm already at my destination. You can get anywhere. I can drive from here to Folsom, New Mexico. I can be in your country in 2 days of driving.
Oh yeah. I can be in Texas in a day and a half. I mean, it's not, if your dogs are conditioned for it and you got your mindset ready, I mean, it's nothing but miles, and it's not hard to do. It's just, once you get a system down, I start out very similar to you. I make sure the dogs are nice and empty, and they're stretched out, and they don't have any pent up energy. I absolutely do not just go to the kennel, throw them from the kennel straight to the box and leave. I'm asking for disaster then, either grumpy dogs or them emptying out in the box. So yes, there's a process that happens before we ever even hit the road.
Yep.
And like I said, that first day they're on a fasting, so they're emptied out. I'm not worried about any kind of road sickness, accidents in the box, anything like that. So that first day I'll push 10 hours.
Yep. Me too.
And then when we stop and I feed on the road, I give water, but I give water with food.
I do
so
too.
They get water.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, they get it at the same time. Because sometimes I have one dog that doesn't it's one or the other. They don't want food, but they'll want water, but and sometimes vice versa. Some dog will want food, but they won't want to drink water. and when they're coming off a fast like that, I got to make sure they're getting some kind of food intake,
Right.
as well as they're still getting hydrated. But I'm not giving them full portions, if that makes sense. They're getting, a very limited amount, so they're not sick. Gut health is a huge thing to me. The dog has a gut ache, he's not going to perform, and it's just like a human. You have a stomach ache, you're not going to want to go to work,
Right.
and so I try to keep it to the bare minimum while we're on the road. And then when we get to where we're going, they'll go ahead and get a full meal, and they'll get to stretch out, and they'll kind of get to do what we did before we left. I'll let them out. They'll get to stretch. They'll get to empty out, run, get out all the jitters that they got built up over the time in the box. And that's usually when they'll get trashy on me. We don't, trash is very relative to me. It's only trash if they don't catch it. So if they catch it, it's whatever. These are, your meat dogs, I'll correct it as we cross that bridge. So fresh out of the box, wherever we're getting, I try not to be too hard on them. They're anxious. They're excited to get where we're wanting to go. And if I pity whatever runs across in front of them,
Right.
that first drop, be it an armadillo or a raccoon. We pray it's the right game, but that first dump out of the box, I'm counting on them to be a little crooked. Yeah. And I've just come to accept that, these are, finished dogs, but they are dogs and they are gonna. So it's usually once.
Yeah, but we're hunting plots and Yog Terriers, so you got to re-break every day. It's an every.
Yeah, it's a reminder every day. It's that first day I don't expect anything huge, and my expectations will rise as the days go on wherever we're at. And
Right.
I think by the end of our trip, the Idaho plots were showing out a lot of the Texas dogs by the time we left. And I was real proud of that, and I wanted to post about that, but I had to check my ego. That was one of those moments where won't look real classy on you, Mr. Ferebee. So,
Right.
the plots did me very proud on this trip. We came back kind of beat up and battered, but they did their job, and I'm really proud with how they did this trip. And we enjoyed ourselves, man. My little Sunday dog scored like a 9.4 in the infamous one dog at Uncle Earl's. She was just a few points out of a bay off, so it was a great trip for us. We were excited. We had a great time. And we got to visit with all of our Southern friends and family down there. And
Right.
it's we love it.
Well, one thing that you started to talk about, and the time that I saw it the most, you were talking about elevation. And I think that's something that we, even as people, overlook. And I would have never even recognized this in myself if I had not listened. I just happened to listen to a podcast on my way out, and it was by a doctor on an outdoor podcast about elevation sickness. And, when you're putting in 26 hours on the road, you can listen to a lot of different things. But that one was kind of like, okay, I'll listen and see what they have to say. And I'll be darned if I didn't I stopped in Kansas, or I stopped in Oklahoma, and elevation was, 700-800 feet. I drove straight to the White Mountains, Arizona, and I was at 9,000 feet within the same day. And I recognized it in myself when I got out of the truck. Stuff starts flying everywhere, and you're rushing around, you're trying to set your tent up and get camp set. All of a sudden, man, I was just like, something's not right here. It's like, you're not in Kansas anymore. It started getting lightheaded and different things. And I looked at the dogs, and they were just kind of moping around too. So I just left the camp set up. There were already guys in camp. I told them, I said, guys, I'm going to go back down the mountain at 7,000 feet and spend the night. And then I'm going to come back up. I'll be back up here in the morning, but I got to have that intermediate acclimation where we're at. And so that was the elevation part. And it seems to me that even dogs that go up in elevation, take an extra day to get those dogs acclimated. And I think it's important. I'm not talking about going out and roading them. If you start putting exercise on them, you're going to exacerbate and make the problem worse.
Absolutely.
You got to just let them tie out and just chill.
Just adjust. And a lot of people don't they kind of take that for granted, and it's like, oh, well, I can travel, 5 hours or 15 hours. I expect my dogs to act the same way. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but you can be within the same elevation in 15 hours within your own state. Like,
right.
Until you start really traveling and you start hitting these different elevations, and you're absolutely correct. If you're feeling it, your dogs are feeling it, period. And we traveled from Idaho to Maine in 2021 for a bear hunt we took our own dogs. Me and my good friend, Paul Green, we loaded up and we traveled clear to Maine with our own animals.
Mm-hmm.
And we had, we got finished bear dogs, and we catch bears in any state. And we proved we could do that, but it took us 5 days. It wasn't easy, but elevation is a big contributing factor.
Mm-hmm.
We went from, I think we're sitting at I don't know, just under 7,000 feet right here, I think, and where I'm at. And we're right at sea level in Maine, man. You're at ocean on 3 sides of that place, and everything's wet and everything's soggy, and the barometric pressure is different, and humidity is different, and everything is different. And say the dogs weren't chasing bears, they were absolutely, doing their best.
Yeah.
But we didn't give them any time to acclimate, and we talked to another gentleman. He's like, well, when I went to Wisconsin, it took the dogs a better part of 4 or 5 days to get their wires reconnected to where they could catch game.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was, at first I was kind of like, whatever, dude, my ego was trying to get a hold of me and be like, no, it's just your dogs, it's just
right.
your dogs. And in a way it is just your dogs, but it's your dogs are having to acclimate. Your dogs are having to get different, to change to the different elevation and get, because like I said, elevation sickness is a real thing, going up or going down. And if you do either one of those things in a drastic hurry, you're going to feel it, and
yeah.
And like I said before, if you don't feel good, you're not going to feel like working. And a dog is the same thing. And just like you said, when you look at your dogs at 9,000 feet, they were moping around and they were sluggish. Their body has to adjust. They have nothing to do with that part.
Right. That's just a physiological thing that every living creature
being deals with.
Yeah.
Yes, there are going to be exceptions to the rule that you're going to have a dog and he's going to be good and he's going to operate fabulous wherever. But that's an exception to the rule. Right. I mean, it's
it's a lot different. It's a lot different than just driving around. Competition coon hunters put a lot of miles on their dogs. There's no doubt about it. Up and down the road, 4 or 5 nights a week. But most of the time that's in pretty similar elevations. There isn't a whole lot of elevation change. One of the things that I found is while a bear is a bear, the scent conditions, the barometric pressures, the wind currents, the humidity, the moisture in the ground, those dogs are, if you've hunted every day in Idaho, and then all of a sudden you go to Maine where everything's wet, that's it's a different scent picture that they have to understand, because all of a sudden what they're used to feeling, smelling at, 20% humidity, they line that out to catching bears. You're thinking, man, it's a lot. We ought to be able to catch game on this moist ground. All of a sudden, man, they get scent overload, and they're not sure. It takes them a minute to adjust to that.
Oh, it absolutely does. It's our dogs were rigging tracks that they couldn't move. They're rigging the scent conditions were crazy. They'd be up on the box and they would rig, and you would set them down, and they just wouldn't know what to do. There was just and it was frustrating in those first few days. And even the bears are different. The animals are going to be different. Maine is the perfect example of that. the bears in Maine do not like the tree. At least where we went,
Mm-hmm.
it is known that the bears love to walk, and they'll walk and walk and walk and walk. And the outfitter we went with, when we pulled in, he's like, man, I ain't seen a bear treed this year yet. All the bears have been harvested on the ground. Hope you boys are ready. And I was like, man, alive. And that kind of, kind of had like an ego check moment then. I was like, oh, great. Like, do we have the dogs we think we have, but they did it. It ended up being, they treed the only 2 bears the outfitter had seen in trees that year.
Yeah.
And like I said, they showed up in true fashion, but we had to let them acclimate, and those first few days we were there was very frustrating because, like you said, we were catching bears at home. There was days we were catching 3-4 bears a day, and we go over to Maine and when I hit day 2 and hadn't looked at a bear, I was really starting to question everything, and Paul, my good friend Paul, he was like, man, like, I don't know what's going on. I know these dogs do it. They do it back home. And, and we really had to sit down and check our egos and say, listen, like, we just traveled.
But sometimes you feel like you're making excuses, though, Roy. It's like,
Yep.
You do. I mean, you go through that process and then you worry that you're making excuses for your dogs. And of course, that ego kicks in, and we've all seen this guy on Facebook. It's like, I don't accept any excuses from my dogs, and I'm just like, well, you haven't hunted enough places to be humbled yet, Well,
that's it, and you could be a superstar at home, and you could be a superstar within your comfort zone. And I was one of those guys, I was like, man, I can catch bears anywhere, dude. Like, I can catch bears in Idaho. I can catch them anywhere.
Exactly. And everybody thinks where they hunt is the most difficult place to catch game.
Yeah.
My God, bring them dogs out of here. I'll show you what
First, I'm gonna lie to you. We went to Texas. I'm like, these flatlanders ain't gonna know what hit them. We're gonna hit Texas running. We're gonna catch pigs in stacks. We're gonna stack them high as cordwood.
Yeah.
Boy, we didn't look at a hog for a week, man. And it was just frustrating, but once they acclimated and once they got, their wires reconnected and they got back to feeling themselves, we started catching and we started looking at game.
Yeah.
And, but there's, and there's a learning curve, but there's also an acclimation period. And that's a big deal. People have to give their dogs a little bit of time to acclimate to where you're at. And then they'll start showing you what they're really made of. It's,
a good dog at home. I look at a dog's drive. If a dog's got the drive, the prey drive, the hunt drive, that drive is hardwired into that dog. Just because you change zip codes, it may take them a few days to acclimate, but that drive's going to come back. And
you can't fight breeding. No, you can't fight breeding.
And, one of the funny stories, and may have told it on the podcast before, but was that trip to the White Mountains. Larry Anderson drove all the way down from Flathead, Montana, drove south. I drove from Indiana. We go to the White Mountains and we're hunting and we're getting just little rig strikes. We're just like, whoop. We look at each other. It's like, that's not good enough to turn loose on, and a truck comes up behind us and man, their box blew up. They dropped the tailgate, went right up on the mountain, jumped the bear, ran it a mile, had it treed. Larry and I are sitting there looking at each other like, did we bring bear dogs or not? And then we started talking about it. Those dogs that were local dogs knew that they already had it dialed into their brain that's something we can tree. Where our dogs coming from, a less arid climate, were smelling the bear, but they weren't sold out. So my point is those local dogs knew that was the best they were going to get that day. They knew that was a bear that they could run and catch. Where my dogs my dogs were like, and Larry's dogs, and Larry had bear dogs. There's no doubt about it. And they just were like, we don't really smell it. But if you'd have kept them there for a month and hunted them in those conditions, I'm convinced that they would have been rigging hard on the same amount of scent that we just got little blurps on.
Well, they have to realize that, it's a confidence builder. I mean, if anything, like it's when you're in your home turf, you're most confident, and those dogs that are from there, they know that any scent means go time, and
that's right.
Where some places where a little scent doesn't necessarily mean go time, and let's keep moving, find a better track, and it's
I dropped Cajun out and on one of those little strikes like that, and he went out there and smelled around a little bit, and he looked at me like, "Are you crazy? There is nothing here." And
those guys want me to cold trail.
Yeah, those guys, the same guys came in behind us. They got a strike. They ran the bear. So it is a matter of acclimation, getting to know. It's kind of like if you've ever traveled for work, and all of a sudden you get to the South in August, and it's like, why do people even work in this kind of weather during the day? Let's just go straight nights. It's too hot to be working.
I thought it was impossible.
Yeah.
When I first moved to the South, I was like, there's impossible people working this stuff. What are you talking about?
Yeah. But once you become acclimated, you just get right with it. So,
that's exactly it. So it's check the egos, let your dog acclimate, and he'll become his normal self again. It's that's something that I had to learn, that it wasn't my dogs acting up. It wasn't, their faults. It wasn't a flaw, and it definitely wasn't me making excuses for him. You can't fight biology. You can't fight, just what happens to you.
Yep.
Biologically. So it's, so no, you have to take in it all factors when you're doing this travel and hunting gig. It's,
so acclimation. We talked about, feeding schedules and getting in a routine. Man, dogs are so routine oriented. My dogs, they all know that if I come out of the house, they know when I'm loading the truck to go on a trip. They see the truck, I park it in the same place. They're all standing there. They're watching me. They're watching every move. So they know what's coming the next morning. But I want to hit on that feeding with water again real quick for everybody. This has been such a valuable trick for me, is when I feed, I put water in every dish. That way I ensure, and my dogs will all lick the bowl dry. So I know that hydration is one of the things that is often overlooked in these hounds. And a dog can go several days without food, but if they're not hydrated, they're not going to go. So every morning when I get up, it's the same routine. I've got my dog's archery tie out, stretched out there. I go down the line, and all the dogs spend the night in the box most nights. And I'll go down the line. I'll put half a cup of dog food in each bowl. And then I'll put half a quart to a quart of water in each bowl. And I can just let them out one at a time. And they each go to a bowl. I hook them up. I let them stand there, drink their water, do all that stuff. But I really I only carry one bowl when I travel, or one bowl per dog. I don't carry a water bowl and a food bowl. They get it all in the same bowl at the same time.
Yep.
And then I'll refill bowls if they're going to be tied out.
Well, it cuts down on what you have to pack, and it makes stuff a little bit lighter and easier to keep and manage. And but no, absolutely. I feed and water at the same time. Keep hydrated. Like I was saying before, sometimes you got dogs that like to eat, not drink. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of your way of combating that, where if they want to eat, they have to drink. And vice versa. If they want to drink, they have to eat, type deal. Right. So it's just my way of making sure the dogs are keeping fueled. Because there is dogs that do have blood sugar issues. I believe Kirk Price out of West Virginia, he had a dog that had some blood sugar issues, that if he wasn't feeding him before a hunt, the dog was falling out during the hunt.
Wow.
So it's important that your dogs are getting the fuel and they're getting the nutrition that they need so they can be successful. I mean, it's very important. So yeah, I couldn't even tell you when I learned that water and food trick or who I learned it from. It's been 20 years I've been doing that. And it was just simply that, for a way of when we were traveling with the Bulldogs and we had a picky eater, a picky drinker, we just had to make sure they had something in them. And we pick up tips and tricks.
I'll tell you something else that I do is I'll keep just one of those quarts of chicken broth in the cooler. If I get one that's not drinking, just a little splash of chicken broth in the water, man, that turns them on and they'll get after it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just the typical water baiting. It's called water baiting. You want that dog. Yep. Arlie Reynolds talked about it in one of our real early podcasts about water baiting. I've done all kinds of stuff. I've taken like canned cat food and put it in a gallon orange juice jug that's, rinsed out full of water. Put that cat food in there, give it a shake. Man, those dogs can't wait to drink every bit of it.
Yep.
It's awesome. And if you use any supplements like the dogs are hydrated or anything like that, that's how you get them drinking it.
Yep, water baiting. Yep. And then that's a trick, that everybody needs to pick up. We need to have all kinds of tools for our toolbox with these dogs for when we're on the road. And like I keep a bottle of Dr. Pepper around, dogs feeling sluggish, or even a package of honey. And I'll rub honey on their gums and give them a little bit of energy, a little bit of boost.
That's a neat trick. What's that? The honey on their gums. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, I got a dog. He's burned out and he's tired and, just needing a little boost. I'll give that dog a shot of honey in his mouth, and the sugar in that honey and everything will perk him right up.
Wow. That's a good
one.
Yeah.
Like when we're hunting the heat and when I'm hog hunting, I always keep a Dr. Pepper in my bag. Get a dog that's cut down and it's hot outside and he's panting, or even borderline heat stroke. You pump that Dr. Pepper down them. Caffeine will keep their heart pumping. Obviously, you're hydrating them a little bit, and then you're putting sugar back into their system if they've lost it via bleeding or anything like that.
I've never heard of that one. I like the honey. I'm going to do some research on the Dr. Pepper, though.
Yeah, I learned that from old Bulldog, man. Yeah. Believe it or not, I've saved a couple dogs with it that were borderline shock.
Yeah.
And, from blood loss and just, it's heat, just being overheated and everything like that, and it goes along with everything else, like tools in the toolbox, alcohol. Sure. And you got a dog overheating, you wipe his pads down with alcohol and wipe his ears down and armpits, and you'll save a dog from heat stroke that way. And
yeah,
so I think, just a rapid
evaporation.
Exactly. Yes, sir. Yeah, so I think little tips and tricks like that are essential for a traveling dog hunter. We got to have ways that we can help treat our dogs before we can locate a vet, find a vet, get a dog into a vet. That's one of the big concerns about, at least when I travel. If I have a situation go down,
me too.
Can I handle it myself? Am I able to handle it myself? If I can't, do I have somewhere nearby that I can get to?
Yeah.
And
I'm so fortunate that even if I just hunt with good dog men too, between all of us, we can figure something out, Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's always so valuable to be able to.
I think as houndsmen, we've become resourceful, just out of, necessity. And when you get a group of us together, I mean,
we can be pretty
mountains.
Daggone resourceful. That's for sure. Well, Roy, we better wrap this one up, man. This has been a good conversation. Hopefully it's helped a bunch of people. You got anything that we've missed or you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
No, just keep it positive and keep it pure and keep it beautiful and keep them treed.
Man, I bet do you have peace signs on your dog box? Roy, I appreciate it. Man, one piece of advice I would give everybody is there's so much to experience out there with these hounds. And I know a lot of people love home cooking. I know people that are just content as can be hunting from home. But some of the most gratifying experiences I've had are taking this pack of dogs that I give such a hard time and seeing them perform in different places, man. That makes you feel good, and you make great friends. You have good experiences. You talk about catching hogs in Louisiana and bears in Virginia and lions in Idaho, Montana, and wherever you're hunting. I mean, and you got pictures of the same dogs doing all of it. For me, that has been such a rewarding experience. So get out there and do it. Get out there and get after it.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
So, well, folks, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Houndsman XP podcast. Roy's real prevalent on social media, especially Facebook, and he's always dropping stuff. I go over there and follow him and keep track of what Roy's doing with his dogs and pick up some knowledge there. Roy, I appreciate your time and joining us on this podcast. Make sure that you're checking out the houndsmanxp.com shop. Like I alluded to earlier, we've got all the elite nutrition products there. You guys are burning that stuff up, and I really appreciate it. I didn't know if it would go or not, but people are seeing the results from the supplements. The Essential Dog, we just put the wound sprays on there, and more to come. So check it all out at houndsmanxp.com. And until next time, keep them in the woods. This is Fair Chase.